I'm now reading from the book of Matthew, chapter 26. We have reached the part of the death of Yeshua. When it had come to pass, Yeshua finished all these sayings and said to his disciples, "You know that after 2 days is the Passover, and the Son of Man will be delivered up to be crucified." The chief priests, the scribes, the elders, they all assembled at the palace of the high priest, who was called Caiaphas, and plotted to take Yeshua by trickery and to kill him. But they said, "Not during the feast, lest there be an uproar among the people." When Yeshua was in Bethany at the house of Simon the leper, a woman came to him with an alabaster flask of very, very costly fragrant oil, and she poured it on his head as he sat at the table. Here it says she poured it on his head. In another gospel, they said she poured it on his feet and used her hair to wipe his feet. The disciples who saw it were indignant and said, "Why this waste? This fragrant oil could have been sold for much and given to the poor." When Yeshua was aware of it, he said to them, "Why do you trouble the woman? For she has done a good work for me. You will have the poor with you always, but me you do not have always. For in pouring this fragrant oil on my body, she did it for my burial." She was embalming him. Myrrh was something you used to embalm a dead body. Yeshua saying she's doing everything was a sign. Everything was a harbinger of what was to come. He said, "She's doing this for my burial. She's anointing me for burial. Assuredly, I say to you, wherever this gospel is preached in the whole world, what this woman has done will also be told as a memorial to her." One of the 12, called Judas Iscariot, went to the high priest and said, "What are you willing to give me if I deliver him to you?" They counted out to him 30 pieces of silver. So from that time on, he sought opportunity to betray Christ. On the first day of the feast of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Yeshua saying, "Where do you want us to prepare for you to eat the Passover?" And he said, "Go into the city to a certain man and say to him, 'The teacher says, my time has come. It's at hand. I will keep the Passover at your home with my disciples.'" So the disciples did as Yeshua had directed them, and they prepared the Passover. When evening had come, he sat down with the 12. Now, in another gospel, they talk about him washing their feet. In this one, they don't. He sat down with the 12, and as they were eating, he said, "Assuredly, I say to you, one of you will betray me." In the other gospel, it said, "One of you whose feet I have washed will betray me." He washed the feet of the man he knew was going to betray him. Can any human being do that? Would any human being be able to do that? I doubt it. It shows you what it means to be spiritually alive. You will do things that in the flesh would seem impossible, highly improbable. The things that you do in the spirit are those things that are done from your higher self, from your spirit man. Those things have a fragrance about them. Anything we do in our flesh can only smell of rottenness or flesh, greed, pride, and covetousness. All that is the flesh. And then they were all exceedingly sorrowful. One of them began to say to him, "Lord, is it I?" And he answered and says, He who dipped his hand with me in the dish will betray me. The Son of Man indeed goes just as it is written of him. But woe to that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been better for that man if he had not been born. Then Judas, who was betraying him, remember Judas has already got the silver, answered and said, Rabbi, is it I? And he said, You have said it. And this is the only gospel out of all four that speaks of these words, that Judas asked this and Yeshua confirmed it. As they were eating, Yeshua took bread, blessed it, broke it, gave it to the disciples and said, Take, eat, this is my body. Then he took the cup and gave thanks and gave it to them and said, Drink from it, all of you. This is my blood, the blood of a new covenant, which is shed for many for the remission of sin. But I say to you, I will not drink of this fruit of the vine from now on until that day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom. The blood of the new covenant. God had a covenant with man. The rainbow was the sign of his covenant that he would never destroy earth again. Yeshua says, this is the blood of a new covenant. A covenant is a blood promise. It's a blood contract. When people made covenants with one another in the past, they would actually mingle their blood together. Yeshua says, I am shedding my blood for you to make a new covenant with you. A covenant for the remission of sins. What is the meaning of remission? Is it not the moving away, the receding, the eradicating of sin? It took God to come down in the flesh for sin to be eradicated and for him to die. Sorry, I didn't say that. For him to shed his blood, for sin to go into remission. Is there any other way to get rid of sin? I haven't read it anywhere else. I haven't heard it anywhere else. Let's read it again. Drink from this, all of you, so that my blood is in you. We have covenanted together. For this is my blood of the new covenant, which is shed for many for the remission of sins. And when they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. Yeshua said to them, All of you will be made to stumble because of me this night, for it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. He was their shepherd, their good shepherd. He was warning them. Doesn't this tell us something? God is going to warn us before things happen so that when they happen, we will not be alarmed or astonished or done in, so that we will know what is to come, so that we will not be shaken, so that our faith will not be shaken. He says, But after I have been raised, I will go before you to Galilee. Peter answered and said, Even if all these are made to stumble because of you, I will never stumble. And Yeshua said to him, Assuredly I say to you, that this night, before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. Before dawn, you will deny me 3 times. God knows every single thing we are going to do. He knows it. And He has His forgiveness waiting and ready for us. He knows what we're going to do. He knows how fallible flesh is. He knows how weak flesh is. But he also knows how strong spirit is. The more we crucify our flesh, the stronger we are in spirit, the stronger our spirits get. Let's hasten that. Let's hasten that work. And Peter said, even if I have to die with you, I will not deny you. And so said all the disciples. Then Yeshua came with them to a place called Gethsemane and said to the disciples, sit here while I go and pray over there. He took with him Peter and the two sons of Zebedee, and he began to be sorrowful and deeply distressed. Then he said to them, my soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even to death. Stay here with me, watch with me. My soul is exceedingly sorrowful. Let's see how he says it here. He was plunged into an agonizing sorrow, and he said to them, this sorrow is crushing my life out. Stay here and keep vigil with me. Did you see that he said, my soul is exceedingly sorrowful? We are body, soul, and spirit. Our spirit is the God particle of us. It's where God resides. Our soul is what makes us who we are as people, our personality, our character, our experiences, our likes, dislikes, our biases, our prejudices, every fallacy that we hold on to, our beliefs, our emotions, our memories, all of that makes up our soul. Our spirit is our pure part, and our body is what we see. Yeshua said, my soul is extremely sorrowful. His soul was his humanity. His soul was his humanity. His spirit, he was God in the spirit, and he was man in the flesh. And then he says, my soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even to death. I'm so grieved. He went a little further, fell on his face and prayed, O my Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. He understands. He understands when we are frightened, when we are so afraid of what's to come. He understands when we operate in our flesh. He understands when we are so terrified and so exhausted and so soulful and so sorrowful. He understands our soul because he had one. He had a soul. Look at what he's saying. He came to earth. He came to earth to die, to take away every sin of every man who believes. He came for that purpose, to eradicate sin, to pay for sin, to pay the wages of sin. And yet he says to his Father, if it is possible for me to take away the sin of the world without having to experience what I'm going to experience in my flesh, oh my Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Let me not have to drink from this. And then he says, nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will. Not my will, but your will be done. Not my will, but your will be done. And that has to be our prayer too. Whenever we are bound up in our soul, in our emotions, and our fears, in our mind, and we feel we can't bear it, we can do the same thing. Oh Father, take this away from me. Nevertheless, your will be done. Your will be done. No one else's will. Not my will, not Satan's will, not my children's will, not my husband's will, not the world's will, not anybody's will, but your will be done. Then he came back to the disciples and found them sleeping. And he said to Peter, "What? Could you not watch with me 1 hour? Watch and pray, lest you enter into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak." Our spirits are always willing to do right, to do what God wants us to do. Our flesh is so weak. Again, a second time, he went and prayed and said, "Oh, Father, if this cup cannot pass away from me unless I drink it, your will be done." Don't we do that? Didn't we do that as children? Don't our children do that? Again they come, "Mama, please, I don't want to do this. I'm so tired. Mama, I don't want to do this. Mama, can't I not do this?" And you're like, "No, Baba, no, no, son, no, child. It's 11 in the night. But you have to hand this over tomorrow. You have to hand in this assignment. You have to do it. I'll make you some hot chocolate. I'll be with you. I'll sit with you. But you have to do it. You have to do it." Isn't that what happens? Some things just have to be done. And he came, and again he found the disciples asleep, for their eyes were heavy. So he left them and went away again and prayed the third time, saying the same words. "Please, Father, if it's possible, let me not have to do this." 3 times he went to his Father, begging that he wouldn't have to face the morning, that he wouldn't have to be crucified, face that terrible death. And not just the death. Remember, he has to carry the weight of the world. He has to pay the price for every man's sin that has ever been done upon the earth. That was the weight. That was the true weight. Can you imagine if each sin that you or I committed was a lashing or a thorn that would pierce him, or a nail that would go into his palm or his feet? Imagine if that was each sin that humanity has, each sin that we have committed. And then he came back to the disciples and said, "Are you still sleeping and resting? Behold, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is being betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand." My betrayer is at hand means my betrayer is here. And while he was still speaking, behold, Judas of the 12, with a great multitude with swords and clubs, came from the chief priests and elders of the people. Now his betrayer had given them a sign, saying, "Whomever I kiss, he is the one. Seize him." Immediately he went up to Yeshua and said, "Greetings, Rabbi," and kissed him. And Yeshua said, "Friend, why have you come?" Then they came and laid hands on Yeshua and took him. Suddenly one of those who were with Yeshua stretched out his hand and drew his sword and struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his ear. And Yeshua said to him, "Put your sword in its place, for all who take up the sword will perish by the sword. Or do you think that I cannot now pray to my Father, and he will provide me with more than 12 legions of angels? How then could the scriptures be fulfilled that it must happen also? Do you think that I could not command the angels of heaven to come and lift me away from this? Don't you see this has to happen? This has to happen." In that hour, Yeshua said to the multitudes, "Have you come out as against a robber with swords and clubs to take me? I sat with you daily, teaching in the temple, and you did not seize me. But all this was done, that the scriptures of the prophets might be fulfilled." Then all the disciples, forsook him and fled. All the disciples forsook him and fled. And those who had laid hold of Yeshua led him away to Caiaphas, the high priest, where the scribes and the elders had assembled. Yeshua followed him at a distance to the high priest's court. And as he went in and sat with the servants to see the end, Peter followed him. Now the chief priests and the elders and all the council sought false testimony against Yeshua to put him to death, but found none. Even though many false witnesses came forward, they found none. But at last 2 false witnesses came forward and said, "This fellow said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and to build it in 3 days." The high priest arose and said, "Do you answer nothing? What is this that these men testify against you?" But Yeshua kept silent. He did not say a word. And the high priest answered and said to him, "I put you under oath of the living God. Tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God." They were expecting the Messiah. They were expecting God to send salvation. They are not just questioning him. They are still trying to find the truth. And Yeshua said to them, "It is as you said. Nevertheless, I say to you, hereafter you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the power and coming on the clouds of heaven." Then the high priest tore his clothes, saying, "He has spoken blasphemy. What further need do we have of witnesses? Now look, you have heard his blasphemy. What do you think?" And they answered and said, "He is deserving of death." They spat on his face, beat him, struck him with the palms of their hands, saying, "Prophesy to us, Christ. Who is the one who struck you?" They were playing like Russian roulette with him. Now Peter sat outside in the courtyard, and the servant girl came to him, saying, "You also were with this Jesus of Nazareth, weren't you?" And he denied it before them all, saying, "I do not know what you're talking about." And when he had gone out of the gateway, another girl saw him and said to those who were there, "This fellow was also with Yeshua of Nazareth." Again he denied and said, "I do not know the man." And then later those who stood by came up and said to Peter, "Surely you also are one of them, for your speech betrays you." And he began to curse and swear, saying, "I do not know that man." Immediately a rooster crowed. Peter remembered the words of Yeshua, who had said to him, "Behold, the rooster will crow and you will deny me 3 times. He went out and wept bitterly. When the morning came, all the chief priests and elders of the people plotted against Yeshua to put him to death. When they had bound him, they led him away and delivered him to Pontius Pilate, the governor. Then Judas, his betrayer, seeing that he had been condemned, was remorseful and brought back the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and the elders, saying, "I have sinned by betraying innocent blood." He confessed his crime. And they said, "What is that to us? You see to it." He threw down the pieces of silver in the temple and departed. And he went and hanged himself. But the chief priests took the silver pieces and said, "It is not lawful to put it into the treasury, because they are the price of blood." And they consulted together, and with the money they bought the potter's field to bury strangers in. And therefore that field has been called to this day the field of blood. Then was fulfilled what was spoken in Jeremiah the prophet, saying, "And they took the 30 pieces of silver the value of him who was priced, whom they of the children of Israel priced, and gave them for the potter's field, as the Lord directed me. Imagine when Isaiah prophesied these things. It would have made absolutely no sense to anyone reading it. Little did they know, centuries later, it would be fulfilled. The Bible is a book full of prophecy, of things to come. Many have been fulfilled. Some are yet to be fulfilled at the end of days. Now Yeshua stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, saying, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And Yeshua said to him, "It is as you say." And while he was being accused by the chief priests and the elders, he answered nothing. Do you know it was prophesied? Like a lamb to the slaughter, he did not speak a word. He did not defend himself. Like a lamb led to the slaughter. It was written. Then Pilate said, "Do you not hear how many things they testify against you?" But he answered them not a word. And the governor marveled greatly. At the feast, the governor was accustomed to releasing to the multitude one prisoner whom they wished. At that time, they had a notorious prisoner called Barabbas. They gathered together, and Pilate said to them, "Whom do you want me to release for you, Barabbas or Yeshua, who is called the Christ?" They knew that they had handed him. He knew that they had handed him over because of envy. While he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent to him, saying, "Have nothing to do with that just man, for I have suffered many things today in a dream because of him." I want to read to you what his wife said. Let's see how Eugene says it. Oh, sorry, 27. Yes. Oh, here. Yes. While court was still in session, Pilate's wife sent him a message saying, Don't get mixed up in judging this nobleman. I have been through a long and troubled night because of a dream about him." Meanwhile, uh, meanwhile, the chief priests and elders persuaded the multitudes that they should ask for Barabbas and destroy Yeshua. The governor answered and said to them, "Which of these two do you want me to release to you?" And they shouted, "Barabbas." Pilate said to them, "What then shall I do with Yeshua, who is called the Christ?" And they all said to him, "Let him be crucified." Pilate said to them, "Why? What evil has he done?" They cried out all the more, "Let him be crucified." When Pilate saw that he could not prevail at all, but rather that the tumult was rising, he took water, washed his hands before the multitude, and said, "I am innocent of the blood of this just person. You see to it." And the people answered and said, "His blood be upon us and on our children." What a curse they took on themselves. My goodness, not just on us, but on our children. Then he released Barabbas to them, and when he had scourged Yeshua, he delivered him to be crucified. The soldiers of the governor took Yeshua into the praetorium and gathered the whole garrison around him, stripped him and put on a scarlet robe on him. When they had twisted a crown of thorns, they put it on his head and a reed in his right hand, and bowed the knee before him and mocked him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" They spat on him, took the reed and struck him on his head. When they had mocked him, they took the robe off him, put his own clothes on him, and led him away to be crucified. Now, as they came out, they found a man, a man of Cyrene, Simon by name. Him they compelled to bear his cross, and when they had come to a place called Golgotha, that is to say, the place of the skull, they gave him sour wine mingled with gall to drink. And when he tasted it, he would not drink. Then they crucified him, divided his garments, casting lots, and fulfilled prophecy by doing so. They divided my garment among them, and for my clothing they cast lots. Sitting down, they kept watch over him. They put up a sign over his head and the accusation written against him: "This is Yeshua, the King of the Jews." 2 robbers were crucified with him, one on the right and one on the left. And those who passed by blasphemed him, wagging their heads and saying, "You who destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. If you are the Son of God, come down from the cross." Likewise, the chief priests also, mocking with the scribes and the elders, said, "Ha! Saved others, cannot save himself. If he is the king of Israel, let him come down from the cross. Then we will believe him. He trusted in God. Let him deliver him now, if he will have him. For he said, 'I am the Son of God.'" Even the robbers who were crucified with him reviled him with the same thing. Now, from the 6th hour until the 9th hour, there was darkness all over the land. There was an eclipse. When Yeshua was on the cross, this fact has been verified. There was an eclipse at that time. The sun was darkened. There was no light. And more shocking than that was that the temple curtain was ripped in two. It was symbolic of the fact that now we have an open heaven through the blood of Christ. No more will only the high priest go in, because Yeshua became our high priest. There is now no more thick, heavy cloak, heavy curtain between God and us. We can stand before him freely. At about the 9th hour, Yeshua cried out with a loud voice, saying, "Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani." Oh my gosh, this line. My God, why have you forsaken me?" He was so filled with the sin of man that God turned away his face. God could not look at his son. And Yeshua called out, "Father, Father, why have you forsaken me? Lama sabachthani." Some of those who stood there and heard what he said, "This man is calling for Elijah." Immediately one of them ran, took a sponge, filled it with sour wine, put it on a reed, offered it to him to drink. The rest said, "Let him alone. Let's see if Elijah will come and save him." And then Yeshua cried out with a loud voice and yielded up his spirit. It is finished. Then behold, the veil of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. And the earth quaked. There was even an earthquake. And the rocks were split. And the graves were opened. And many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. And coming out of the graves after his resurrection, they went into the holy city and appeared to many. You know, all these zombie movies and movies where people come out of the graves wrapped up in, in burial cloths and all of that. The Walking Dead, The Return of the Mummy. Where do you think they got the ideas from? It's all from here, it's from the Bible. The, the graves were opened, they were split open, and the dead came out and returned back to their homes. They were resurrected in his death, they were resurrected. And they went into the holy city and appeared to many. Please note, the Gospel of Matthew is the only Gospel that says this. And when the centurion and those with him who were on guard saw what was the earthquake and the things that followed, greatly feared and said, truly this was the Son of God. What were the signs? What happened at his death? There was an earthquake. The hours before he died, there was an eclipse. And the temple's curtain that separated the Holy of Holies from the general public was split in two from the ceiling to the floor. That curtain, if you read the way God gave dimensions for everything in the temple to have been made, the curtain was this 30 feet high, tall, velvet, thick curtain. For that curtain to be split in two, it would have been a strike of lightning in the Holy of Holies to sear it through like holy fire. It was symbolic because the Jews were steeped in religion. Yeshua came to separate the veil and open up God to man. No more does man stand behind a curtain interceding through a priest who can also come only once a year. Yeshua became our high priest, and through him we can stand daily, minute by minute, before our God. The centurion, the captain of the guards, and all the guards, when they saw these things, they feared so greatly for what they had done and said, truly this was the Son of God. Many women who followed Yeshua from Galilee, ministering to him, were there looking from afar. Among them were Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of the sons of Zebedee. When the evening had come, a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who himself had become a disciple of Christ, went to Pilate and asked for his body. Pilate commanded the body to be given to him. When Joseph had taken the body, he wrapped it in clean linen cloth, laid it in his new tomb which he had hewn out of rock, and rolled a large stone against the door of the tomb and departed. Mary Magdalene was there, and the other Mary sitting opposite the tomb. Here again, guards are posted at the tomb, and this is the only gospel that says it. On the next day, which followed the day of preparation, the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered together to Pilate and said, Sir, we remember while he was still alive, how that deceiver said, after 3 days I will rise. Therefore command that the tomb be made secure until the 3rd day, lest his disciples come in the night and steal him away and say to the people, he has risen from the dead. So the last deception will be worse than the first. Pilate said to them, You have a guard. Go on your way, make it as secure as you know how. So they went and made the tomb secure, sealing the stone and setting the guard. People so didn't want to believe that Yeshua was the Son of God, the Messiah, the Christ who was to come, that they even said the guards were paid off and all sorts of things. They did not want to believe that he was resurrected. I'm stopping here at the end of chapter 27, because after this comes the part where he rises from the dead. Thanks be to God our Father, and to his Son, our Lord and Master, King of kings and Lord of lords. Melech HaMelachim, Adonai HaAdonim.